Coach, hey, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Really appreciative, grateful you taking the time. This is my first discussion with a coach at Kenyon, so you get that honor. But thanks for taking the time today.
I am always happy to chat D3 soccer with you. I know I'm in a different office than the last time I spoke with you, but I'm excited to be speaking with you.
Yeah. You're like you said before we recorded, you're responsible for some of those trophies because you were on the losing end.
Yeah. I got to give props to my predecessor, Chris and Darren. I mean, what they did at Kenyon for the last, together
remarkable
decade, but Chris for 18 years was incredible. And they left me a pretty good spot to take over. And all these trophies behind are all of theirs. And I think I was on the losing end of a handful of them too.
That's great. You should figure out a way to put that in your resume, right? Like, I was 6 trophies. One I won, but all the other ones I lost. Anyhow. Hey, so I'm just going to pull this out. You land this great gig at Kenyon. You leave St. Olaf. They go on this year, win a national championship in fashion, like really impressive run throughout, right? Mm-hmm. Your thoughts?
Just extreme pride, like in all of them. Justin, all the players, like it was a special group of guys. I loved my time there, and it was very cool to watch them go on and do awesome things. It's kind of came full circle. There's a kid on their team, Zach Harvey Latham, who is kind of more of an unsung hero on their team. I don't know how many games he started, but he's a really good center mid. He's an Australian, and he transferred in a couple years ago. And when we were recruiting him, I think he was a little nervous about head coach potentially leaving, and because that had happened at his previous school. And I shared with him that, one, I wasn't looking to leave, and two, we had also kind of designed the program where it didn't revolve around any one person, whether that be just Victor or just Hakeem. Like there's good examples throughout the last couple of years that when one of those guys didn't play, someone else stepped up and they were perfectly fine. And I think I used the example because COVID was pretty prevalent that, if I got COVID and got really sick and I had to miss an entire season, Justin would step in and arguably do a better job than me. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, I didn't get COVID this fall, but I wasn't there. And Justin didn't arguably do a better job. Justin did the best job possible. And so it was pretty cool. It was very cool to watch them have all the success that they had, because those guys really put the work in over the last 4 years.
Yeah. I mentioned this to you that I think them winning the national championship, and I told Coach Oliver the same. Like, you don't win it in a vacuum. You don't win a national championship just because it happens to you that year. There's a lot of stuff that happens over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and I think you're a big piece of that. And Justin is as well. I'm not trying to dismiss him or take anything away from him. I just think both of you combined provided all the foundational stuff for this to happen this year.
No, I appreciate that a lot. We got some really, really good commits at St. Olaf over the last 5 years. I don't think anyone was more important than when I hired Justin. He was the perfect guy to build the program with, and the perfect guy to leave the program with. And I think he probably doesn't get enough credit for how good they were this year. I mean, people, I think, forget that they started 1-3, and it's a very easy time to doubt yourself losses to Kenyon, Ohio Wesleyan on the road, and Chicago, like there's no shame in those results. But I think that their season this year was spectacular. I'm very happy for them. And at the same time, I'm like extremely excited to be here, back in Ohio and in leading the Kenyon men's soccer program because
Mm-hmm.
we've been a very good program that's been pretty established nationally, and I think that there's still potentially another gear that we can get to, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited to take on this new adventure.
Well, I'll say to end, congratulations, because I think you deserve that as well, as Saint Olaf. But congratulations, because there's a piece of you in that as well. So,
Thank you.
and
I
and be
appreciate it.
and beyond that, all right. Let's just start with the obvious. Just tell me about the season. Your first season. You came on after spring. You came on after
I
spring.
moved back to Ohio like I think August 4th,
Fourth, yeah,
and
yeah. So you didn't have the time to sort of acclimate yourself to the
no,
program. Te- Tell me about that. How you think the season went based on all of that.
yeah. I think at some point in time, I'll look back at this fall and just like think, man, you really juggled a lot that fall. I mean, it's a lot to just learn, about 30 new guys and how things operate at a new institution and whatnot. But factoring in like moving across the country, and having a pretty long commute, to and from work for this fall as we like look to buy a home. There was just a lot of moving parts this year. And then you factor in starting off 0-2 and conceding 8 goals in those 2 games, and it becomes a little bit more challenging. So, for the way we were able to kind of right the ship after the first, the opening weekend, I am beyond proud of what we were able to accomplish. I think I think Kenyon's been really good for like the last decade or so, and I think we were still really good this year. I think we just won games in a different manner than
Mm-hmm.
than we had grown accustomed to. I think the one of the biggest strengths of Kenyon over the last 5, 6, 7 years is the depth.
Yeah.
They kind of operated on this like line system that they
Mm-hmm.
would make wholesale changes and nothing would drop, and they just
Mm-hmm.
kind of press teams into submission. And we just, for in my opinion, we really lacked that depth this year,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't have the ability to go as deep as previous years. So we had to log a lot more minutes on people,
Mm-hmm.
and we also had some pretty unfortunate circumstances with regards to some injuries, to some pretty significant people throughout the year. That
Yeah.
um, the only silver lining to it was that they happened so frequently that we never really got into a rhythm and never really like banked on someone being available for a game because we just expected
Yeah.
something to happen. So it forced us to think kind of outside the box, and to start off the way that we did 0-2 and losing on aggregate 8-2, to go whatever I think 16-2-1 in the next 19
Yeah.
games, is something that we're pretty excited about.
All right. So I do have to ask you, like, what's going through your head when you walk off the field against John Carroll on that second day, and it's dawning on you that you did lose in aggregate 8-2.
Yeah,
Like, like I
yeah.
would have been like, "What the hell have I just done?"
Well, it's the manner in which those games were played were actually like in hindsight, I'm very happy about it. Like when we lost to Ohio Northern, we scored first. They scored legitimately two of the best goals I've ever seen in my life live.
Mm-hmm.
Like a dead ball straight on from like
Yeah,
45 yards out, and then a one timer off a corner kick that
yeah,
I don't think any goalie in the world was saving. And then the other two were like, in my opinion, two of the softer penalty kicks I've seen, and they were the only two penalty kicks we were called on all year.
right,
And like when we rewatched that game the next day, we actually like there were we felt that we got dominated physically, not necessarily like with expected goals and things like
right,
that, where
right.
we thought, all right, maybe. maybe we can stick with this and we'll still be okay. And there was none of that after the John Carroll game. That was just a shellacking.
Chill.
And, in some ways, I'm happy that those games materialized the way that they did
Yeah.
because, if we lose a 1-0 game or a one goal game, we're probably trying to grasp at straws and say, "Oh, we're really close and we're right there,"
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we weren't. We weren't right there. We were very far off. And
Hmm.
I also think it's okay to say, it's a new coach that got
Yeah.
thrust on the guys 2 weeks before the season or whatever it was, and there was definitely a get to know you phase that
Yeah.
we tried to accelerate as quickly as possible. But I think our response after that was really good. We played a Hanover team that
Yeah.
was pretty good. They play a hard schedule every year, and they got
Yeah.
some good pieces. And we had to grind that game out. And I think we won it with like 5 or 6 minutes left.
Mm.
And then we played my old team, who won the
Yeah.
national championship 2 days later, and that was a big game for a number of reasons. But it that was about as good of a weekend that you could have scripted.
Yeah.
Following the opening to like concede 0 goals to get two wins, let alone one against the future national champs. And at the time, I knew how significant of a win that was. With their record being 1-3, I don't think others really understood that it was a pretty good win that both Ohio
Yeah.
Wesleyan and Kenyon picked up over the
Yeah.
weekend. But that's how it went.
Yeah. What's funny is I watched the game against St. Olaf, and this is terrible to say. Like I dropped St. Olaf off my radar
Yep.
of just because they were 1-3, and
Yep.
I just wasn't sure. Yeah, they didn't look as confident as they did last year, and then probably it wasn't until like middle of October I'm like, hey, they're really good again. What happened? Like it just
Yeah.
got just totally bizarre. So, did, was there a point? Was that the point? Well, first of all, was that like the first inflection point after that John Carroll game where you were like, hey, we're not as close as we think we are? And was there another point where you were like, we are better maybe than what you thought after that game?
That's a great question. And I would say probably the first inflection point was it was probably Ohio Northern.
Yep.
Just because, like in my experience competing against Kenyon, I don't remember a time where Kenyon was ever the team that got physically like beat. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they usually put their will on
Hmm.
whatever team I was a part of and most other teams. And that was the part that when I got the job, I was like, well, cool. I don't need to talk about that because they already do it. And then we got through that first game, and I was like, where did all that go?
Hmm.
So I think that may have been the first part of it, but I also like shoulder a lot of it too.
Hmm.
I trying to coach 30 new players
That's
and them get used to me at the same time, and a new assistant coach too. Like there were just so many moving parts at the beginning of the year.
yeah.
So I'd say the first inflection point was Ohio Northern, and it was never like, hey, I don't think we're that good. It was more like, I think we just have to work a lot harder
Yeah.
than we think we have to. And then I'd say the next point. I mean, when we got through, we opened up conference play at the Paw, home against OWU, and at Denison, and then actually at Worcester, and that's like arguably the hardest 4 game
Hardest
stretch
stretch.
that you
Yeah.
can have.
Yep.
And when we got through, particularly the Denison regular season game, and we got through that week 3-0, I think the belief in our group like really skyrocketed because we can talk a big game and say, hey, we know we're good, but eventually you draw your confidence in the fact that you delivered
Yeah.
in games. And you get through a week where you go to Greencastle, Indiana, and beat a good DePaul team 3-1. You come back and you beat a good Ohio Wesleyan team 2-0,
Yeah.
and then you go on the road and beat a really good
Good
Denison team
Denison. Yeah.
1-0. And honestly, Denison in that regular season game, I don't think outside of the John Carroll and ONU games, I don't think we had been kind of outplayed
Mm-hmm.
like we were for a good 65, 70 minutes in that game. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that I think we were fortunate to get
Mm-hmm.
out of that day with a win.
Yeah.
And then like we had blown some teams out, we had really grinded some games out, and we felt really balanced of like we can play with and hang with whoever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'd say the second inflection point of like we could really do something was when we got through that 4 game
Yeah.
stretch because
Yeah.
the Worcester game, I mean Worcester at Worcester is one of the hardest games in our conference. It's not
They're unforgiving at
particular.
times. Yeah.
For sure, and they Andy has like they work so hard.
Hard.
Nothing
Yep.
comes easy, and I mean we gave up a goal and we were losing with 20 minutes left in the game, and we scored 2 goals in the final 7 minutes, including with I think 6 seconds left to win.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we
Yeah.
kind of pulled that one out, and
Mm-hmm.
when we got through that, it was like, all right, let's come up for air,
Yeah.
and to open up the way we did, and to stabilize the way we did was it was a lot for any team.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think, more impressive given the fact that it was still like I've been at Kenyon for 6 months,
Yeah.
so it's just
Yeah.
very. I think it's more impressive considering how new we all were to each other.
Yeah. 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 I was just looking. I was just looking at the schedule and noticed that the game against Ohio Northern was September 1st. So you legitimately had 13, 14 days with the team to go
Yes.
into. Oh, so
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so I get it. Like I'm like it's you. For all intents and purposes, you're like, hey, do we have any throw-in plays that you guys use, or like where are the
Exactly.
pennies? Like
Yep.
where do we hide the pennies?
No,
Right?
absolutely, absolutely. And then you look at like Ohio Northern won the OAC
Yeah.
tournament. They went to the Sweet 16 again. I
Yeah.
mean, they were one of
They
the best
beat
teams we played.
Messiah. Yeah.
Yep, like
Yeah.
they're a really good team. So
Yeah.
you factor like that was the only silver lining I took from that opening weekend is like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we got our rear ends handed to us, but it's not like we lost to some really like bad
No.
team.
No.
Like we
No.
lost to two
Yeah.
of the best teams in the region, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I know from my time on the national committee that your season ain't over when
Yeah.
you start it like that against two good teams like that.
Yeah.
You lose your ability to potentially suffer some of those later on in the year and
Yeah.
still be okay. But
Yeah.
fortunately, we didn't, so that was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. No, it's just interesting because John Carroll, Ohio Northern didn't have. Well, they had one of the craziest, toughest schedules, and they
Hmm.
didn't like go through flying colors in their
Right.
first 5 or 6 games before the conference, and then the conference kicks off, and
Yep.
they really sort of got into gear. So, all right, so how are you feeling going into not the the NCAC tournament?
I was feeling pretty good. Ultimately, the goal that I have every year is I want to win. I mean, you want to win everything.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly want to win the regular season conference championship, and we had done that at that point. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like, I think we were riding an 8 game winning streak at that point in time too. And I feel like once we beat DePaul in the semi, that like I felt great that we had booked our ticket to the
Mm-hmm.
tournament, and that's obviously another big goal is make the tournament and see how far you can go in
Mm-hmm.
it. So that was a good game. We gave up a late goal to make it 3-1, but it was zeros at halftime, and we came out in the second half and played great. And then found out later that night we'd play Denison, and we knew whoever we were going to play between Denison and OU was going to be a very big final.
Mm-hmm.
Based on how the games went down this year, we felt like Denison, and also the heater they got on after they were upset by
Mm-hmm.
Worcester. We were not we're nervous for every game, but the Denison OU semi, we knew someone good was going to come out of it, and that it was
Yeah.
going to be a good NCAA tournament prep game.
You must have been feeling. You must have been pretty proud of the fact that you ended up finishing first in the conference, right? Like that must have been
Yeah. I
for
mean,
considering all of these circumstances and
yeah.
coming in and such early. Like that has to have been something that you're proud of, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Chris Brown and Darren Moore, they assembled this awesome program that has, I mean, they had won 7 consecutive NCAC
Mm-hmm.
regular season championships. And uh, they we haven't lost an NCAC regular season game. When I got the job, it was at 51 games. So
Holy
um,
smokes!
it's a decent pressure situation to
Wow.
come into. So
Yeah.
um, for where we started to then run the table in the conference and go a perfect 8-0 and like stretch that streak to 59 games to win our eighth consecutive. Like for me, it feels good because it feels like I contributed a small part to
Yeah.
what has been this awesome legacy they left behind. And that's been, it makes it a little bit more fun
Mm-hmm.
to be able to like look at some things in the office and know that I was actually a part of it. It wasn't all done right before I got there.
Yeah. Or it wasn't in a bad way. They got the trophies because you lost to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, the you go into the NCAA's. You're obviously you lose to Denison, and now new can of worms. What walk me through your thinking at that time, and
Yeah.
sort of how the team was responding and sort of ready for whatever happened after
Yep.
Denison. Yeah.
Um, so the Dennett, like it's very, it's a stark contrast to the regular season meeting with them where,
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier, I felt like they like kind of took it to us for 65, 70 minutes. And honestly, I kind of felt the exact opposite in the final.
Mm-hmm.
I think the final shots were like 15-3 in our favor and we lost 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
And that also isn't to say like they played better. Like the game, the stats don't always tell the complete side
Mm-hmm.
of the story. Um, and I think I forget, I think we may have outshot them the first time. But we were not the better team in that first game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I did feel like we controlled the game in the final
Mm-hmm.
and had 3 backbreaking moments that they punished us in.
Yeah.
And
And they're that good too to
and
do
they are
that.
that good.
Yeah.
Like I think Brandon's been one of the best coaches around
Yeah.
for quite some time, and he's a huge reason why we were able to have the success that we had when I was a student athlete. And
Mm-hmm.
now he did it at Case, now he's doing it at Denison, and
Mm-hmm.
you know they're too good of a team to
Yeah.
have 3 pretty costly mistakes and expect to go unscathed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. They can
So
punish you like the best of them, right? Like just.
yep, and so I kept that perspective too. When the game was over, I still felt like we were going to get in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like I love conference tournament finals because you don't get to replicate. It's such a good prep for the NCAA
Mm-hmm.
tournament if you know you're going to be
Yeah.
there, and um, it was good reminders that we needed to work on some things going into the tournament, and it
Mm-hmm.
felt like we had a pretty good week of practice. And Dominican, I'd actually played them 2 years ago in the first round when I was at St. Olaf, and they
Mm-hmm.
still had like their 3 best players from that team were still there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they were a good team, and it took us a little bit to break the game open. But Alem had a great opening game and bag two, and we were able to get through, which was great because they were a very good team. And then we sat back and watched Otterbein Wash College, which was a fantastic game. And when Washington College got through, we went back inside and tried to watch some film on them and get ready. But yeah, it was the Wash College game was for me. I thought it was an awesome end-to-end game. I think the stats were almost dead even. I'd say in the overtimes they had one absolutely golden chance at the end of the first
Mm-hmm.
overtime to take it, and our goalie made a big save. And I thought we had kind of the golden chance to win it with like 5 seconds left in double
Mm-hmm.
overtime, and we just missed. but I think I love the way they play.
Yeah,
They're a
I'm a
class
fan.
team. I think
Yeah,
Coach Dunshee
he's
is
awesome guy.
class, and
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised to see them go on the run they did and get to a
Mhm.
Final Four. And I think they did it playing like a great style and doing it with class. And
Yeah,
when your season comes to an end and it comes to an end at the hands of
a good
a team
team.
that you think kind of carries themselves the right manner, it's a little bit easier of a pill to
Yeah,
swallow.
yeah, yeah.
So we it's funny. After the game, I told him that I'd be a big Shoreman fan the rest of the way, and then I realized that they were going to play St. Olaf, and I texted him and said, "I
I.
sorry, I retract that."
Yeah, that's a tough one. See, now you know the world I live in. Like,
I
you
do.
know,
I got a taste of it.
hey, I'm a supporter. No, I can't be a supporter this time. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, but Coach Dunshee is, but I think he's a remarkable guy. I had him on the channel last year. His assistant Ryan Shearer I had on, and I'm trying to get him back on. He tells me his dance card is really full, and so he's got, so and now, but trying to figure that out because it's funny. The two teams that I did this to at the beginning of the season, St. Olaf, where I told you, where I just sort of at the 1-3, there was something about the game against Kenyon that really didn't get me, and I'm like, these guys are not. The other one was Washington College. Like
Yep, because they tied so many of their games.
yeah, and I'm like, they're not that good. They're not that good. And then maybe it was the game against you, or I got to look at their schedule. I forget who they played. The game against
They
Mary Washington, I was like, these guys are really really good. Like, and
yeah
you know, yeah,
yeah they were, and the I thought penalty kicks was
oh
honestly a
yeah,
fair like I anytime a game ends in pens it isn't ideal, but like that game was so neck and neck.
yeah,
We missed one, they made all of theirs, and
yeah.
and they lived to see another
I think
week.
it was a
But
slug fest. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
hey, I'm gonna punch you, you punch me back. I'm gonna punch you, you punch me back, and just
for
waiting
sure,
for the first one to drop. Right? Like,
for
it
sure.
was almost got that sense, like back and forth, and the
Yep,
control of the ball was amazing. Like,
yep.
the entire game for both teams. Like, I was like,
And
what? Like, this is the way a game should be played.
one of the areas I give them a lot of credit is in both the games they played in at Kenyon, they took the lead and gave it up like
Yeah,
within 5 minutes.
yeah,
And to come out on top of both those games when, like against us, they took the lead on the road with 15 minutes left, gave it back 5 minutes later on the road. And that's just like sometimes you get in your own head and you
yeah,
collapse a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit. And, I
Mm-mm.
think they outshot us in the overtimes and
Yeah,
they held on firmly. And they did the same thing against Otterbein.
yeah,
And yeah, they were class. And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
they'll be good for a few years to come for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, let me just shift over to this is probably a loaded question. Like, what are you going to do this spring? Like, I just mean that again because it's been a whirlwind for you. You probably haven't. What do I know? But it doesn't seem like you have had the time to actually do the things you want to do to start getting the program the where you want it to be,
Yeah.
right? Like in the way you see it. And I don't mean that because you're just not doing anything. It's just that you had 3 months of games and practices that it's very tactical in my opinion. Like it just ends up
Yeah.
being
No,
tactical. What do I got to
you're
do for the next game, right?
you're definitely right about that. That like the fall really was just it was a lot of soccer coaching,
Yeah.
and this is a time of year that it's a lot less soccer coaching and more like life coaching
Yeah.
and making sure that the right behaviors are coming out and you're holding guys accountable to the standards that we want. We get 24 practices this spring. We're a little low on numbers, but we studying abroad is a pretty big thing here, and we
Mm-hmm.
have a very, very strong junior class, and I think
Mm-hmm.
all but one or two of them are going to be abroad,
Mm-hmm.
which will not exactly help our numbers at training, but it also opens up the door for some other guys to try to
Younger
make
guys.
a stronger claim for them. Um, but I'm excited to. when you come into a program like Kenyon that's been good for so long, you got to be very careful how strong you come onto
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
And the last thing I wanted to do in the fall was say, we're doing it my way, the way you've done it is wrong. Because the way they've done it clearly hasn't been wrong. I think Kenyon's won more games than every school except Messiah over the last decade.
hmm
And I think this is the time of year where I can start to layer in a few of the changes that I would like to make.
hmm
Behaviorally and also with like strength coach and liftings and things like that. You know, I'm looking forward because I do believe that every team in the country says that they want to win the national championship. And I would say that if every team says it and only one gets to do it, it begs the question, what do those teams actually do? And
yeah,
I don't think I'll ever feel more validated right now with how off seasons can look with St. Olaf holding the national
yeah,
championship trophy. So, it'll be some lifts with our strength coach, some good conditioning. The guys will have some player run futsal, and I just think this is the time of year where you see who really like wants to do things because it's all optional.
yeah,
You know, it, there's they're not going to be docked for not showing up to things that you
yeah,
can act on anything right then and
hmm
there. But I want to coach guys who want to get up early and do those kind of things frequently in the off season because I
hmm
think this is the time that in Division 3 that when you have a team full of intrinsically motivated guys, they can start to separate
yeah,
themselves a little bit.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a big differentiator between a school like Kenyon and some other schools, right? Where you just have these kids who are super highly motivated to do the things that they do, right? So
Yep.
academically, athletically, they are all that always pushing, pushing. How do I get
Yep.
better? How do I get better? And I think that's a huge advantage for you. And I would think it's got to be sometimes a lot easier on this, in the spring and when you have expectations of players to do the things that they need to do on their own because you can't be there, right? For
Yep.
the obvious reasons. Um,
Yep.
from a recruiting standpoint, have you gotten started?
Yeah, yeah, we're going to bring in a pretty sizable class this year, which I don't think that's abnormal when a new coach takes over.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanting to, and it's literally the exact same thing that I did at St. Olaf. The
Mm-hmm.
first class there that I had like the ideal amount of time, like a year and a half to put together was the now seniors, and it was like a
Mm-hmm.
12 or 13 man class. And I'm thinking along the same lines
Mm-hmm.
for here, and I really really like where we're at right now. We still have a few more spots available, and I think we're close on a few guys that could help us a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
I think we got some great students coming in. I think we have some very impactful soccer players coming in, and I think most importantly, I think we have some guys that I'm just going to look forward to working with on a daily
Yeah.
basis coming in. So I'm very excited about bringing in a good first class.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to turn you down because I just don't have the academics to get into Kenyan. So I'm still in search of my team for the fall.
I'll
Um,
serve as a reference for you for somewhere
yeah,
else.
thank you. Yeah, yeah. I always tell people my speed is unmatched. My speed is unmatched. Um, because I don't know, like I'm assuming you have a pretty wide um, recruiting geography, right? For Kenyon, like you
Yeah.
can go to California and recruit a kid, and they're
Yep.
going to be like, "Oh, Kenyon, yeah, I
Yep.
dig Kenyon."
For sure. I think of the guys we have coming in. I'm off the top of my head. We have two Liberian internationals coming
Oh,
in.
wow,
We have Long Island, New York, Cincinnati, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Houston, and we're still talking to a handful of guys, actually Florida, and still talking to a handful of
yeah,
guys from California. So
yeah,
it really is all over.
yeah,
And it's something that we want to have a footprint that is that national and even international.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's a big. I always ask that question because I do think that's a big deal. Like if your player pool's big enough, you can almost you can get a good amount of players that bring different things to the game, right? And I
Yep.
just think that's really helpful, especially as you look to build um, into the future.
Yep.
Liberian internationals,
Yes.
holy
Yeah.
cannoli! So you're
Yeah.
basically what you're saying right now for everyone to hear is that you're reloading, right? Like,
That's the hope. Yeah, that's the hope.
so, um, all right, Coach. This was fantastic. I do appreciate the time. Love catching up with you. I'll definitely have to make it out to Gambier. I'm actually trying to work on a trip out to Ohio next week, so it depends on where I land. I might be knocking on a door.
Yeah, no,
Steal a
please,
couple of the trophies. They'll look good on the mantle in the back. You know.
please let me know if you're in the
Yeah.
area. We'd love to show you Mavic Field
Yeah.
and all
Oh,
the nice
I
things we have.
played there. I don't. This was back in the day. Um, Played there in the middle of a snowstorm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
I want to
brutal.
say it was 2017 maybe, but Kenyon made an investment in the grass facilities here that are
Yeah.
pretty significant in
Yeah.
the I think the Division 3 landscape, and our two grass practice fields and our game field I think
Tell me they're
are
heated.
among. They're
Yeah.
not heated, but I
Ah,
think most of the teams that play on
they're
them would probably tell you
Yeah.
they're pretty nice and some
It,
of their favorite away
it
games to play in.
it was the nicest field that we had played on ever. I
Yeah,
mean, it was again, this is back in the '80s, so that ought to say something. And it was just a putting green, and then you just
for
could.
sure.
That and Worcester were the two nicest fields we played on. But
Yeah, I think I think the athletic directors that we have at Kenyon help put a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
the good things that we have in place. And
yeah, yeah.
that's actually so Justin Newell is our associate AD, and the way that I ended up here is kind of unique. Where I had worked on the national committee with Justin
Mm-hmm.
for the last 3 years, and I had put a bug in his ear a couple years ago, like, hey, if the Kenyon job ever opens, please let me know. And I was home visiting my family this summer, and he
Mm-hmm.
texted me and said, "Hey, Chris Brown just retired. Would you have any interest?" And I just said yes. And I'm in Columbus right now for the next 5 days, and said, "Do you want to come up and get lunch tomorrow and check it out?" And the rest is history. But
Oh, that's
I'm
awesome.
very grateful. You never really
Yeah.
know how things are going to turn out, and like I think Justin mentioned with you, like his whole journey to St. Olaf
Yeah,
started
yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
playing a game at Ohio
That's
Wesleyan in
what. Yeah.
2017, and I think my journey here kind of started with serving on the national committee and
Yeah.
forming a good relationship with my now boss. So it worked
Yeah.
out well
There are no coincidences,
for
right? Like
sure.
that's sort of my thing. There are no coincidences in life, right? It's stuff happens in a way for each person that, yep, that's just the way it is.
For sure.
All right, so if I get out there, I'll let you know. But again, thanks for the time and all the best, right? Like
Thank you.
I'm cheering from afar.
I appreciate your time as always, and I look forward to watching these future interviews that you keep
Good.
doing.
All right, thanks, Coach.
Awesome. Yep. See you.